Hey there, welcome to Simply Worldbuilding. Today we're going to be doing a bit of a video on how to start a campaign. In the instance of, you've actually managed to get a few players together. They say, yeah, absolutely, we'll show up at your house on Wednesday every single week for the next 5 years. And for some reason you believe them. But now you have the problem of actually having to come up with something. Now in this, we're also sort of assuming you're making your own content. This isn't necessarily like, oh, I found a book with an adventure in it. In our play, we've pretty well explicitly made or exclusively made our own worlds and own plot lines. And so this is going to be more focused on assuming that sort of scenario, although I'm sure some of it will translate as well. It's just something that we're a little bit more familiar with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just sort of the general gist of what to think of and how we personally handle starting a campaign. When it comes down to coming up with a plot, I think that's probably a good place to start. Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular things that you like to do in that regard?
I think there's a fair amount of homework that you have to do before you can start a campaign. Because you need kind of, your setting, your vague theme, your vague idea of what you have. Mm-hmm. But I'm a firm believer in a solid session zero and getting as much as you can from your players before you actually commit to big things. Because your players have a huge, or your player characters have a huge impact on how the game will be played and what is best suited for them.
Yeah.
So if you can get sort of the core identity of your players and the kinds of things that they like to do in their campaign. You did this at one point too. You kind of asked us, pretty early on, what even are our favorite aspects of D&D?
Yes.
Like, do you prefer the role-playing? Do you prefer the combat? Do you prefer, political intrigue or whatever, what have you? And those are important things to get out of the way right at the beginning so that you know what even to lean into for your campaign, because you'll have it all, but if you know what makes the best, most satisfying game and story, then that's how you and your players are going to have the most fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely a good point, is, starting in reality, asking your players sort of what they expect and kind of setting... and also setting some sort of ground expectations or ground rules is also totally cool. Like you say, are players into combat? Are they into role play? Are they into puzzles? Are they into what sort of aspects are those? And also setting expectations in other areas as well. I find if you are less familiar with the people you're playing with, you may be friends or acquaintances with them, but you don't know exactly where their boundaries lie. That might be something good to adjust, like levels of sexual content or gore, or levels of just stuff that can generally freak people out. Probably establish the levels that people are comfortable with.
And there's also a few theories that I've heard that all kind of come back to the same point, where it's like you remind them right at the beginning that, like, hey, you've got this token, this coin, this dice, or something like that, and if you're ever feeling uncomfortable with whatever's happening, you don't even need to necessarily explain it. You just pop that on the table, and then they know, oh, okay, something that's happening here is uncomfortable. Like, we'll skip past that, and if there's anything important that the other players need to know or something that happens there, then you can tell them afterwards, and you can give the notes or whatever to the player that was uncomfortable, but without having to play out this whole scene at a table where somebody might not be feeling comfortable, they might not like that type of content, or maybe they just aren't really willing to experience that kind of content in front of other people, and that can be an uncomfortable setting as well. But the kind of idea that they have an out if something is not grooving with them, not a fun experience, is that then you can gloss over that and let them know whatever the important thing of that scene was, or if it wasn't important,
just brush it off. Yeah,
because you've got this is a story that everybody's telling together, but you're telling it together. It's not you telling it at them. So if that is not something that they're enjoying, enjoying it is the entire point of playing this game.
Yeah, the fun is what it's there for. And This is the thing, is like, if you're lucky, you might have some sad moments, but that's also kind of the fun part.
Yeah.
But yeah, so setting those expectations, like for us, I feel like we've had very little limitation, and so we've been lucky that way. Like there's been a lot of child endangerment in my campaign, and a rather uncanny amount. A lot of the time it's just because I'm like, yo guys, you got to save them. Like it'll really put them into put you guys in gear.
Yeah.
But I could see how maybe with other players I might need to stop doing that.
Yeah, they may be upset by it, or maybe even less motivated by it than we are.
Yeah, exactly. They may discover a little something about themselves that they didn't necessarily want to. But yeah, so establishing boundaries and also expectations with your players is probably the best starting point. Now, another thing to establish with your players, at least in my opinion, when it comes down to making a campaign that is entirely going to be made from the ground up, is to, before you start making the plot, have your players make their characters. The reason for this is because I think having a plot happen to your characters is one thing. Having a plot that revolves around characters is better. You want there to be a reason that they are the protagonists, in my opinion, because you could have, the Dragon King is returning, and no one is involved with that Dragon King for any reason. Their origins are spread out and not involved with the current plot line at all. That totally is fine, but I find it more interesting for characters when stuff to do with them is directly involved in the conflict. Yeah,
it's much more motivating, it's much more powerful to have it built entirely around them from the ground up than it is to sort of go back and, work them into it. Because it's the same way that we describe our world building in, the other videos, is the more loose threads that you can have so that you can build onto them, the better. But if you already have your plot, your big bad, all of this stuff, trying to then work them in is more work, and it's less impactful, because you can say the big bad torched your village. Fair game, that's a reason why you'd be angry. But if they truly, their elements are built into the foundation of the campaign, that's where you get the powerful motivation, the powerful feelings, and that type of thing. It's much more impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And so, see if your character or your players can make characters, and then, ask them about their backstory, or even things that... One thing that I do a lot when I make characters, and I think it also helps me try and help draw out the characteristics of other people's characters if I want to help them make them, is I'll think of little moments that character would go through. Saving, and I'm not talking they lost their sister at the beginning of the campaign or pre-campaign, and they've been looking for her and finding her. That's sort of more a goal of that character, for example, but moments that feel like they characterize that character. For example, if you have a very, very lawful good, let's say stereotypical paladin or something like that, try and think of a little scene in your mind that really makes that character feel like that character for you, like helping out an endangered child, or donating to some sort of local organization that's helpful to people, and how maybe that would the place around would react. Try and think of a scene, a singular scene.
What even caused them to be interested in becoming a paladin in the beginning?
Yeah.
And then that's the kind of thing that once you know and you can identify, then you can sort of take elements of that powerful foundation of this character and put it back into the campaign later, and they'll know as well that that's a thing, and then they'll have these strong feelings evoked. Right? Yeah,
and so also as a dungeon master, it's an exercise I like to do as making my characters, but also as a dungeon master, I like to ask players, hey, are there any moments that you just picture happening? Because it's within my power to make them happen. And I know that might not work for everyone. The idea of like scripting a moment might feel a little bit weird for what essentially is supposed to be an improv game. And it doesn't have to be one for one, and God knows campaigns will change as they go. But trying to ask players what type of moments they picture can help you come up with other ones later that might be similar or related. And then, yeah, when they do come up, wow, that really felt in character and great. And so having ideas for how to do that before you have even started the plot makes making the plot a lot easier, because you have like these little ideas or moments or just little threads that you can be like, oh yeah, why don't I pull on that one just now? Short answer, I find starting with the characters is way better, because then you can make a campaign that revolves entirely around them.
And definitely the best elements of the game come out when players truly feel like their character, they feel like they know what their character would do, what the character would think. So the more that you can sort of evoke that character to actually come to life, the better.
Yeah.
So you can also do things like, you know, there's a lot you can do in your session 0, such as like have conversations about what are this character's motivations, like get as much information as you can session 0 and build that in. But also if you can have like maybe even pre-campaign do some sort of like team building exercises of some sort where they sort of get to know their character a little better, because so much of the early campaign I like to try and get them to know their characters as best as possible and try and get that character to come to life rather than just be sort of some notes on a sheet. So the more you can do to get that character to come off of those pages, the better your campaign is going to go in the future as well, because that's what the game is all about. Yeah,
totally. Now, when you say session 0, what is that to you and how does it play out?
So a session 0 to a lot of people means creating the character, like rolling your HP, choosing your spells, and that sort of thing. And that can very well be a thing. It's nice to have everybody around and sort of chit-chat while making these characters. But basically, Session 0 breaks down to just pre-campaign, everybody is sitting around sort of discussing. And that's why there's such a good opportunity there to get as many details as you can for your campaign to build around, but also ask them these sort of things or talk all around, and maybe they want to link some of their backstories. This is the time to get as many of those foundational things that allow this character to be larger than a sheet of paper in the works.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. So yeah, you can have your session 0, which is mostly your sort of discussion amongst players. But then when it comes down to a session 1, how do you like to start?
There is the like lost to time classic cliche of the tavern start. I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with it. For a first DM especially, that is kind of like, you know, there's not a lot of thought that you have to necessarily put into it. It gets your characters in one area, so be it. But it's not so much that it is bad as it is lost potential to me. Because if you do something that is a more dynamic, a more personal start to your campaign, then that is very much more motivating, and it helps, like I was saying, get these characters off the page. If you can start them in a situation that is specific to their character, that evokes feelings that, especially in session 1, are fresh to them because they just came up with this character, then that's how you're going to get them to be so much more motivated and so much more in character and get that character to life, as well as it'll help push the campaign forward better if you can do something that is a dynamic force to get these characters actually into a party versus we're in a campaign and, oh, there's a guy over at the table. I guess I'll go talk to him. You know, that, so be it. They're all in one area. If you're a first-time DM, you can fall back on that, but it is a lot of lost potential that is you can do better. You can do better than the Tavern Start.
Well, there's a few things that are difficult with the Tavern Start for the players, which makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Is like you said, the okay, there's a lot. Your whole smorgasbord of characters are in a room together, but presumably they haven't met yet, or there might be small groups of them, like, oh, these two know each other, these two know each other, and these two don't know anybody. But still, like, people barely mingle in real life. They're not going to do it in fantasy.
Yeah.
No, but like the idea that just this random group of people is going to walk up and make the best of friends is uncanny. And
it's a much sharper curve to get from, I walked up and said, hey, your hair is interesting, tell me about that, to like, this life and death, I would sacrifice myself for you.
Yeah.
I will also sacrifice years of time and blood and sweat and tears to save your childhood guinea pig from the lich, you know, or whatever. Like, it's such a sharp, like, steep, like, increase from this meeting to this end.
It's 0 to 60 way too quick.
Versus if you can start everybody in some sort of dynamic, impactful, motivating thing that maybe already some lives are on the line or something like that. Or one person starts out the game by rescuing the other person. Now they're indebted, and instead of starting here and going to the sacrificing my life to save your guinea pig, you start here.
Yeah.
It's much more dynamic.
Yeah, and this is also the thing amongst new players who are unfamiliar with the idea of like role playing or tabletop RPGs in general. God, will that feel fucking awkward. I feel like we've all been there in an instance where you have this classic Tavern Start, and it's like they're sitting there racking their brain on how do I engage this, and you can't blame them because it's hard. Like it's super difficult to like this would be an awkward social interaction in real life. Let alone like you're trying to do this and you don't really know how to role play. And so you're like, how would I do this? How would I do this in character? How would I even do this out of character?
It's very intimidating for new players, especially because if you're a veteran player, you've been doing it, you can come up with something. You would have a better time if you had the fuel of something more animated. But
you could even just not care.
Player and you don't know your character well, you don't know really what they would do, you don't even know what you would do. Maybe you wouldn't do anything. Maybe you get yourself a glass of appy juice and leave. So that's kind of what some people's first reaction is, like, I'm not gonna engage here. So
especially because like if you're trying to, like, this is your first instance of roleplay, you're like, okay, I'm trying to be in character. My edgy rogue who's going to loom in the corner probably wouldn't loom there all day. He's gonna say, fuck this joint, I'm out of here, and bounce. And like then that's even more awkward because now the DM doesn't know what to do. He's like, you just left? What the? Either way. So yeah, the Tavern Start isn't like inherently bad, but there's problems with it in the fact that it can make it difficult for new players. If you're veteran players, like you say, it's like you're more experienced, you can find a way, or you just don't care. You're like, this is the start, whatever.
You can make
the cool stuff comes
from
later.
Nothing if you've been doing it long enough, but from somebody who's new, there's nothing to really go from there.
Exactly. So how I like to remedy this, and I feel like it's best mixed with your point as well of choosing sort of character if you can. It's one of those things where it can be difficult to mix this all up at once, but if you have the opportunity, it's a great start, is to have something that involves each of the characters on sort of like a personal plot level. But what I like to do is immediately throw them into danger. Well, that's the easiest way to do it. But what I like to do is put them in a situation where they're sort of forced to work together. It doesn't matter what your background is. You're in an instance where everyone's trying to get out alive.
Nothing bonds you quicker than trauma bonding.
Yeah. Nothing bonds you quicker than being brothers in arms against your will.
Yeah. And maybe Flex Seal.
Yeah,
but next down for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And an example: the very first time I ever played D&D, the dungeon master, for me, what had happened to our characters is we were all captured by orcs. One way or another. It was never really specified, and it didn't really have to be specified. It was the fact that, well, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were in the middle of bringing us up into the mountains to their lair. They were going to basically tie us up and kill us, or feed us to something. Who knows? We had managed to break out, and all of a sudden we're automatically a party, because we all know we each have skills. We all know it's probably best if we all try and get out of this alive. So we're all automatically working together to get out of the situation. And then when we're out of this situation, we've bonded at least a little bit. That sort of weird dead air of trying to force your characters together into an instance, that's immediately gone, because you're automatically a party. Now you can put, that's where you can start to put your plot hooks within that instance, or even just after. But the way I did it most recently is when I started our campaign, our players were stolen and brought to a coliseum to basically fight for their lives. They had snuck out, and really before they could even decide to split off and go do their own thing, another dangerous thing happened. A gigantic horde of harpies attacked the entire city. And so they, having just, kind of done something together and got out of a dangerous situation together, they were kind of glued together in the next instance. And so went to discover the plot from there. But the danger that kind of pushes these people together immediately eliminates that sort of dead air. And the more you can make that involved with your kind of more personal player plots, if you can, the better.
So there's, the option like immediate peril. And also, like, when I was saying, like, get as much info as you can, talk to them in session 0, that kind of leads me into the way that, like, I had started my recent campaign. Where you kind of get their motivation. You say, what is your goal at this stage in your life? At the beginning of where you want to pick up your character on their adventure, where are they at? What are they doing? And what's their immediate first motivation? So for my group, which is these two here and then one other person as well, they had, basically, long story short, warlock swindler trying to gather souls, an old man with sort of like that late life wanderlust trying to find and secure an afterlife, and then a pirate barbarian who had just been conned violently out of her inheritance, and was now recuperating and looking for basically mercenaries or a gang to go get vengeance with. And that doesn't get much easier, because we had just had that conversation of like, well, where are you at? And then we found out that these two perfectly matched together, and our third character was actively looking for more people. So it's not that big of a stretch to say, well, you run into these two lads, and then we've immediately got that dynamic start. And then you can work on now what is going to bind them from here. And maybe that's something like, Evil Lich stole all 3 of your guinea pigs, and then you realize that after day 1, day 2 of working together that you have that in common, and that's going to carry you forward. Or it could be a million other things, but you've already got them together. They're already working towards the same cause. And in that case, the immediate sort of route forward was the most pressing of the things. Is they had essentially been sort of picked up. There was actually a contract, classic, a contract to go and get this vengeance. And so now they're all bound by contracts to go and do this first mission. And that ended up being, by the end of like that whole arc, it was like 20 sessions, and
I think it was exactly 20.
And you don't get more bonded than 20 sessions worth just off of having like, in that first day, I basically asked them like, where are you at the start of this? And then it kind of all lined up, and I said, are you guys cool with at least somewhat kind of knowing each other? And we worked on it together, and easy start, not a tavern in sight.
That's kind of the thing, is like, in that campaign.
Sorry, I had one more thing too as well. Is because in that instance, like, our barbarian pirate was the newest to the party, but these two had already been traveling together since their last thing because they had these, motivational things they wanted to get done before campaign and where they would start for their, their goals. So they'd already been traveling together for a little while, which already starts like with an easier dynamic of you guys know each other and you have a little bit of past. Like on session 1, you can start that, long walk back with what happened. Make some stories up, and then they're RPing, they're getting into character, and their characters are coming off of that paper, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was the thing, is during that campaign, like, there was no we had to meet. We met each other.
Yeah.
And so, like, you already have the ball rolling in that sort of instance. And again, that dead air immediately disappears, or at the very least is mostly gone, because there's no, oh, well, how do you do? I'm trying to meet you right now.
2 of them were already friends, and one of them had just hired them. So there's now like a dynamic between all 3 of them.
Exactly. And so, just trying to eliminate the dead air in between your characters. These are kind of the methods, at least, that we've used in order to make that happen, because the smoother that happens, the better. You'll just get to the good stuff quicker.
Yeah. And the earlier, too, that you can, like I keep saying, get these characters to sort of come to life and these people to get into their characters, the better everything is going to go, because that's what the goal is. So if you can do that in session 1, where they actually feel like, hey, I just played my character for the first time and it felt good and I learned this about them. If you can do that in session 1, then you're thriving. But if you start in a tavern, it might take you until session 3 to feel like your character is kind of actually starting,
Yeah, totally, because it's hard to RP when you're struggling to try and think of what to do.
Yeah.
And so, basically that's the gist on that one.
I wanted to also throw this in. Yeah. I don't necessarily know that it fits the episode description perfectly, but in the same vein of sort of getting your characters, off the paper, getting people to feel really truly like their characters, with each session, and that includes, at least to an extent, session 1, there's a couple of things that when I'm sort of planning a session, I keep in mind, and that is, I told you this the other day as well, you basically only really get one encounter, because everything happens so much slower than you would ever possibly expect when planning. So you get like one session, and then either the build up for that or the come down after that. And it doesn't matter if the encounter is combat or if the encounter is like a role-playing thing, or it could be any kind of encounter you can think of, but you're only ever gonna get one at the best of times, and then the build-up or the wind-down. And within this build-up and the wind-down, or the encounter specifically crafted around it, I like to make sure that each character has sort of a moment in each, I almost said episode, in each session. So, like, that's what I focus on when I'm sort of crafting, like, the next session, is what is this person's sort of, like, moment where they get a chance to actually feel in their character, so that hopefully not a session goes by where they don't have at least one moment where they really felt locked into their character. And that kind of helps them get into it a little bit more, a little bit faster. And then you also get all kinds of those things that build on top of each other, and that's when you can start intertwining things as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you have to assume the amount of time that people are doing sessions on. Some people will run sessions. We normally do probably around 3 to 4 hours, depending on just like how quickly everyone got together, how much we've been chatting about the week, etc.
If you do a D&D like day, first off, that's dope. You've got it good. But then you might get, a second encounter, but probably you're still going to have one main thing. It just might be bigger, and then a longer build up or a longer wind down.
Things will progress a lot slower than you think as a DM in a lot of cases, until you rely on them going slowly, in which case your characters will blow past it. So, don't try not to be underprepared, but also understand that you're likely overprepared. Yeah.
So for your session 1, you should really just, have a thing that they're doing. But there's going to be so much just talking, or there should be a lot of just talking between these characters so they can feel like themselves. And then, try and keep in mind that you want one thing that, group or no group, the rogue is going to do to feel roguey and step into their character's shoes a little bit. One thing that the druid is going to do to sort of feel druidy in each session.
Yeah.
Especially your session 1. Make sure that they have a time to do the thing that their character was designed to do.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point, because this is the thing, is like, while you're being a DM, you're making a long plot, and you're also making micro plots within that, and then maybe even smaller ones within that. And that sounds intimidating. It's not as crazy as it sounds, though, because like there is the long plot. You're like, why are they here? What are they doing? What's the goal? What's the bad guy or bad guys? That's all large scale stuff.
But there's also so many aspects that can change. Like if you make your like idea too firm before you really get to know these characters, that might just not ever happen.
Yeah.
You got to leave it a little flexible, because
And that's why you do the characters first.
Exactly, because you might find out that 55 sessions in that oh, we are not going in the direction, and there's no way to organically bring this back. It would be so much better to have this be the main, you start coming up with these ideas of this is the better end now, and all that's kind of wasted. So you can just kind of create, some of it a little bit more flexible and come up with a final idea later on. You don't need to know it day one.
Totally. But yeah, so that's reaching into overarching plots and stuff like that. But like you say, there's also these little session to session, you wouldn't even call them plots, but moments that you want. Like you said, we have 3 players and a DM. A lot of people have 4.
Yeah.
People have 2. It always varies, but yeah, like you say, what you want is to have moments for each of these characters to do what they are good at. And session 1 is the most important to do that, because I feel like you have the most freedom to do so, because the ball isn't rolling yet.
Totally.
Yeah, you can have the rogue get a moment to pickpocket or sneak or just straight up assassinate someone. You can have the warlock have some sort of sinister moment, or a kind of interesting. I say sinister moment, and that's the only thing I can think of, because that's the warlock I play. But you can have your paladin protect the party, or do some sort of good deed, depending on what your how you want to play that out. But having those cycle through as frequently as possible, like you say, session to session is optimal. Now, stuff doesn't always go that way, but having that is the best, and doing that in session 1 is a good way to have those characters come to life. Is because it's the moment you're I did that really well, even though I rolled pretty mid. I managed to actually do that moment, and so that the player feels invigorated. And when they feel that, they are likely, when people are excited about their character, they come up with more stuff with their character. And so that's when that stuff sprouts.
When they start coming up with more stuff for their character, that's your fuel. That's what you as a DM need. You need to slurp every little thing that they drop as character lore, so that you can weave that back into the game again later.
Yeah, exactly.
But how much more can you feel like your cleric, priest or whatever, if you start the game running a funeral or a wedding or something like that, or even just doing prayers over an urchin child in the street, not a sea urchin. Although I don't judge, but versus they're in the tavern for why? Maybe they don't even drink, that's way more out of the character than if you put them in these situations that they were built for.
Now, to patch up the tavern a tad.
Sorry, tavern.
Yeah, sorry. Not sorry. No, I think the reason a tavern has become such a stereotypical place for this to happen is a tavern is a place where a lot of things can happen. Like you say, okay, maybe your paladin doesn't even drink. Yeah, but also maybe they're going there because they're going to drag out the thief who they just saw steal an old lady's purse, and they know exactly where they went. And so that kind of thing can happen within a tavern as well. Not everyone's just there to drink and chat.
Yeah.
The reason a tavern is actually kind of a good place to do that is because it's almost like a neutral sort of space.
Yeah, it's like a crossroads where every person kind of comes in contact with each other more or less organically.
And so you can put those sorts of moments in there. And you can also even use our sort of techniques within the tavern. The tavern itself is not the problem.
Yes,
it's the expectations of like people just get together, just chat.
Yes.
Just chat. Just happen.
I will say, you can start your game in a tavern. We're only combating the cliche tavern start. That's all. It's
well, I started a one shot. It was more like a small few session campaign, but I started it in a tavern. But what had happened was one of the patrons just turned into a werewolf and combat started. That's another example of the immediate peril forcing people together, because all of a sudden everyone had something to talk about. They had just killed it. And also that was part of the plot hook, because it was actually a very werewolf. Why was there a werewolf in town? Is there more? Was kind of the plot of that small campaign, and so you can force that plot in there, just to push things forward, and then again everyone's chatting again. So yeah, tavern's not the problem, but you just have to put something in there so that people aren't just like, how do you do?
You have to engage them and make them feel like they're characters, make their characters motivated to do things instead of plunking them down in a space that they're unfamiliar with and say, get to it, guys. I worked so hard on this.
Yeah, I have so much plot to go. Now all you guys have to do is all the legwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. How are we doing on time, Corey? I kind of fucked up on the timer.
I think we're probably not far off.
We just hit 40 minutes.
Okay. So we could probably tie it up then.
I don't have much else to say.
No, I think it was pretty solid. I think we have a bunch, so let's go with that then. So yeah, hopefully this kind of helps you, start your campaign out. The sort of main things to keep in mind, I think, from this whole episode is trying to eliminate the dead air in between your players by either putting them in peril, my personal favorite way, or finding a way for them to be intertwined beforehand and kind of already on the way to doing something. Before starting your campaign, I find it best to understand what characters are going to be within it, because the plots you make are going to be better made when intertwined with the characters themselves.
Yeah, your story is going to play out very differently if you have a balanced party versus a party of 5 thieves with invisibility spells.
Yeah.
So it's best to know these things before you start.
Yeah, understanding the characters beforehand and understanding the boundaries and expectations of your players. I think these are kind of the 3 most fundamental pieces moving forward, because the rest of it's just all in the creativity on your end.
Yeah.
It's all, okay, well, now what plot do I make of this? That's up to you.
Yeah.
But just understanding the limitations of your players, understanding the characters of, in order to make a plot a little bit better for you, and having the beginning have a reason for those characters to all be together or come together. And then you'll be off to the races.
Yeah.
Your plot's going to start unfolding.
Exactly. Engaged players, have more fun, build a better story, and then add so much fuel to you, take off a lot of the pressure to build a better campaign.
So, we hope this was very helpful to you. And, if you have any other tips or tricks to let people know, leave them in the comments. Or if you have, any ideas or expansions on our points, feel free to let us know as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you find yourself in a tavern, what are you waiting for? Roleplay!
Thanks for tuning in. See ya.
Hey there, welcome to the end card. Thanks for watching the episode. If you enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe, tell us what you thought. Another thing we got going on is our Spotify and Instagram. You can get a hold of us there, or you can listen to us without having to see our mouths move. What a treat. Another thing that we've got going on recently is we actually did our first episode of an unrelated podcast where we're not just talking about world building, and we called that Is Simply Rambling. If you'd like to hear us talk about the big one, the earthquake, banana extinction events, and the boog scary depths of the ocean, we talked about that for a very long time, as well as a lot of other things, because our minds don't work so good these days. That's... Can you still do that thing on YouTube where you
Annotate?
put a box that's a link?
Annotate, no.
It's going to be down in the description.
It's going to be down below then. See you next time.
in the depths.